Welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few, USPIE's weekly podcast that empowers parents to reclaim their children's education from government bureaucrats and social engineers. In each episode, Sherry delivers the latest news from the front lines of the fight for the minds of the next generation, equipping you with the tools and resources needed to join the cause.
Hi everyone, welcome to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. I'm your host, Sherry Few, and I have another great show for you. Joining me again today is April Few, USPIE's Executive Assistant and a homeschool mom of my own grandchildren. She's also going to be a regular guest host on future episodes of this podcast. But before I bring her on, please give us a 5-star rating or a thumbs up and subscribe to the show. And be sure to visit uspie.org to learn more and join the movement.
Today's episode is brought to you by U.S. parents involved in education. USPIE's mission is to empower parents and local communities to break free from federal and national influences, thereby reclaiming parental authority over their children's education. For more insights from U.S. parents involved in education, connect with us at USPIE on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org.
Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. Joining me today is April Few, who's not only my daughter-in-law, but also a homeschool mom and USPIE's executive assistant. I wanted to have her back to talk in more detail about her experience with home education and how she encourages other young moms to do their research about everything that's available to educate your children at home these days. And I also want us to talk a bit about what goes on behind the scenes here at USPIE, and how a small group of dedicated people can really have a big impact. April Few, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Sherry. I'm glad to be back on.
Before we get started, I wanted to play our recent fundraising video, which gives a short run-through of what we've been able to accomplish recently. So let's watch. Every day, children across America are being taught lies that harm their development and undermine their faith, their family, and even their very freedom. At U.S. Parents Involved in Education, we're fighting to return control of education to where it belongs, with parents and local communities. I'm Sherry Few, president of USPIE. Over the past few years, we've achieved incredible milestones, thanks to the generosity of donors like you. But there's still urgent work to be done, and we need your help. At USPIE, we've empowered parents to reclaim their role as the authority in their children's education. Our documentary, Truth and Lies in American Education, made possible by your support, has opened eyes nationwide to the dangers of federal overreach, which results in wokeism being forced on America's children. Through your support, we engaged a professional PR firm, amplifying our message like never before. Over the past few years, USPIE has reached hundreds of millions through radio, television, print, and digital platforms, exposing the truth and inspiring parents to act. We've helped parents create education sanctuary zones, safe havens where real education thrives, free from federally mandated wokeness, CRT, transgenderism, and other such evils. And we just launched our new podcast, Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. But the challenges we face are immense. Federal mandates continue to strip parents of their authority, and the Department of Education still holds too much power. But with the new momentum from the Trump administration's pledge to close it, we have renewed hope and are focusing on making this vision a reality. USPIE is powered by dedicated, non-salaried volunteers and operates with only 2 part-time employees working a combined 30 hours per week. Your support is critical to hiring a full-time staff member who will increase our capacity and drive our mission forward. Every dollar you give is tax deductible and will help us expand our grassroots network, distribute our documentary to more communities, and empower parents to stand up for their rights. Together, we can ensure that every child receives an education that reflects the values of faith, family, and freedom that have made our nation great. Please visit uspie.org today to make your donation. Join us in this fight for our children, our families, and our future as a free nation. Thank you for standing with us. Wow, it's pretty amazing to see how much we've done, April. So our PR firm has really helped us grow. So we've been able to be on radio and television. We're in print and digital media. And we've even been able to hire a new social media firm. And of course, there's this podcast. We've just done so much in the last, I think it's just been in the last year. It's been amazing. And of course, it all started with the film, of which you were the star, and the Truth and Lies in American Education documentary that we produced and published. I guess it's been a couple of years ago now. So it all started there. It was a great expose for people to understand the really nefarious things that are happening in government schools. And then it grew from there with the PR firm. It's been just amazing what we've been able to accomplish. So what are some of your favorite podcast interviews so far, April?
Yeah, Sherry. So I've been working with USPIE just to start. I've been working for USPIE for about 10 years now, and I never imagined that we would be this far by now. But God has certainly blessed USPIE with amazing volunteers and donors who help support the work that we do. So as far as the podcast interviews, they're all so great. You've interviewed some really big experts on education issues in America. Some of my favorites are Alex Newman, of course, who serves on the USPIE Advisory Board. Alex has been an advocate for getting the federal government out of education for 10 years now. I don't know if you remember, but when I met you and right before I started my work with USPIE, you gave me his book, Crimes of the Educators, to read. And as I talk about in the film, Truth and Lies in American Education, as I was reading that book, I didn't believe most of what was in there until I went down each issue and started researching for myself and was shocked at what was happening in American education. So Alex Newman's is great. Sam Sorbo, her interview really struck me because she's a homeschool mom. I'm a homeschool mom, and she talks about education from a perspective that most people have never even thought of or heard ever before. So she gives some really good insight on parents taking back control of their child's education. And then the interview that you did with Jeff Tamala, who is a law professor, was very interesting to me because I hadn't heard a lot of these things that he talked about. He talked about how government schools are not constitutional. He talked about how schools do teach religion and a worldview through, evolution, how we got here, where did we come from. So schools definitely do teach religion, and he's much more eloquent in describing it than I am. But that interview definitely struck me. So that's probably my top three favorite interviews so far.
Okay, great. I appreciate you sharing that. I enjoyed all of those too. And I'm a big fan, of course, of Alex and Sam and a new fan of Jeff. So I hope that our viewers and listeners will check out some of those podcasts. They're obviously available on our website at uspie.org. So let's pivot to what's really at the heart of USPIE, and that's empowering parents to take control of their children's education. Something you decided to do, which was documented in our documentary film, Truth and Lies in American Education. In fact, I want to show the end of that film where you talk about why you're so passionate about your work with USPIE. Let's look at that now.
Happy birthday, dear Annabelle. Happy birthday to you. It's hard to think that there are people out there that want to control everything, especially when you're raised in a family that you just want to grow up and raise your children, raise your family, and do what you're supposed to do, and come home and not be bothered. Now, there's no way I would ever send my children to public school. I'm not going to be accountable to a school district that is churning out kids that can't read and write. My child is brilliant, and it has everything to do with the way that her father and I raised her and what we've taught her. That child is my child. God gave me that child. And for the government to think that it is their responsibility to take care of that child is just unimaginable. The family is society's foundational unit, and what's happening in public school now is tearing families apart. As a Christian mother, I don't want my child to go to a place for 8 and 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, that teaches them that there are no moms and dads, only partners, that America invented slavery. I mean, all of these things that are such lies. They're not teaching children to read and write and count and things like that, but they're training them up to be little activists. So I really just want to get parents involved and informed, because I didn't know this stuff until I started researching and working for USPIE. So I just can't imagine not knowing the stuff I know, and I also can't imagine not wanting everybody else I know to know this. So now, how do we do that?
Wow. Every time I see that, April, it brings tears to my eyes again. It's been a while since I've watched it, and I couldn't help but noticing that it was Annabelle's birthday party, and here we are about to celebrate her birthday again, her 5th birthday. So what's your reaction after seeing that clip?
Yeah, I guess everything that I said there is even 100-fold more now. It's more relevant, and I am just that much more passionate now than I was, 5 years ago. Everything still holds true that was said in that clip. And yeah, we just need to change the narrative, tell the truth and change the narrative that, I'm going to try not to get emotional. Oh my goodness. You know me, Sherry. That it's best to send our children off to quote unquote experts every day, all day, to learn, because that's not what is best for them, even though that is the norm. We must change that narrative, and that's something that USPIE believes in, and that's one of the reasons why I love working for USPIE.
And I love your passion, which I always remind you of, and you should never be embarrassed about being passionate. And it's really what helps you to be so good at the work that you do, and you are such an asset to USPIE.
The more I observe and hear from parents and teachers about what is happening in government schools, the more I encourage parents to take their kids out of the toxic environment that government schools are. I have so many conversations with parents and teachers, because a lot of people my age are parents of young children and teachers. And they're not easy conversations to have. And like I said, we've got to have these conversations so that we can change this narrative, that government schools are best and they know best and what's best for children. The government schools are, number one, they're failing. There's only about 30% of children on average across the country that can read and write on grade level. They're extremely toxic with the transgender ideology, gender ideology, critical race theory, the anti-Christian propaganda. I mean, everything that's taught in government schools now is the opposite of what the Bible says. And the negative peer influence is a huge thing that I hear about, more so than a lot of other issues. The bullying, and parents tell me all the time that their children are being bullied, and they go to the school administrators and there's nothing done about it. And that is probably the thing that I hear more than anything else, is the negative peer influence that is happening in school. So just over the last several years since the film was produced, I've had the opportunity to speak to hundreds of parents, and I don't ever hear anything good about government schools. And then, of course, all of the knowledge that I know through USPIE, but it's just shocking to me how many parents, especially Christian parents, will continue to keep their children in government schools. But anyway, my passion has just grown, and it keeps growing every year. It seems like the government schools get worse and worse, so it just kind of makes sense that that would happen.
Absolutely. And I've seen you grow in that passion and your knowledge. And again, you've been just a very valuable asset to USPI. And I envision in the future that you will be sitting in my spot and taking the lead in our organization. When my grandchildren get older, I'd be glad to sit back and let you take over. So I know we both share that vision, and I'll be you will be it will be very easy for you to fill my shoes, and I appreciate that about you. So let's talk about some of the most memorable experiences you've had with the work that we do at USPI.
Sure. I'd say the top one is attending the Education Policy Conference in St. Louis, Missouri, put on by the Constitutional Coalition that Donna Hearn founded, who's also in our film. And again, when we went there, there were so many presentations given by experts, and even after working for USPI for several years, I had to go and research some of the stuff because it just blows your mind that you don't know what is happening and that there are so many nefarious things going on in education. Um, I also testified in front of the South Carolina Senate Education Subcommittee on competency-based education, which was an entire experience. Also going to the State House, speaking in front of the subcommittee, and basically having the members laugh at you when you tell them about competency-based education. They don't understand what it is, and so you talk about how it's not good, and I got laughed at. So anyhow, another thing would be helping through USPI, helping. There were multiple states where we helped a slate of candidates, just normal parents, run for school board, and using the USPI model that we had recommended for parents to take over their school boards, and they were successful. So that was pretty amazing to see the success that came from what USPI had recommended them to do. The cost of compliance study that we started here in South Carolina. So USPI has a blueprint for states to establish control of education. And one of the steps in there, one of the first steps, is to do a cost of compliance study where the state will see how much money we get from the federal government and how much money we spend complying with all of the regulations. And that's the first step, because until we know exactly how much of what the actual percentage is that we get from the federal government, we can't really follow the other steps. I think it's a wonderful first step, so that the state legislature can actually see, hey, maybe we're only getting 3% after we spend money to comply with all the regulations, and is that worth it to relinquish control of our education to the government? And I guess I'd have to say filming the documentary. Of course, I can't leave that one out. That was incredible too, because I had the opportunity and the honor to interview 12 or 13 experts in education policy, all with different backgrounds. So that's definitely something that I'll never forget. And I'm just really honored that USPI and you wanted me to be the one to do that. So that was unforgettable. Oh, and thanks to USPI, learning the problems with school choice, because I've been a Republican, and the Republicans always go to school choice as the answer to solve education problems. But even you, I know you had that same thinking before, and some of our colleagues in USPI showed us differently, and how even the voucher system is just a way for the government money to get into all schools, private and homeschool, inevitably, and it can destroy all types of education. So just learning about what sounds so simple, but is very complicated, especially when you start to talk to other people and they don't understand, and you talk about how the vouchers are not good, and it takes a conversation. But it that was definitely something that was memorable, was that aha moment when I was explained how the school choice schemes are bad.
Okay, that's quite a bit, and it's kind of interesting to hear you note the things that were memorable, because I tend to forget how much we've accomplished in such a short period of time at USPIE. Of course, we were established as a national nonprofit organization in 2015, so it's been 10 years ago now. But again, we've accomplished so much in the last few years, but it has been a great experience to watch how we've grown and evolved, even in our thinking, as you described with the school choice issue. Such an important issue today to understand. And of course, our concern is that government money going into private and home education will destroy that alternative. And once the government gets their money in, they get their hooks in, and they'll have control of all education. And we certainly don't want to see that happen. So we need to take a short break, but when we come back, I'd like us to talk about our Millstone of the Month awards, and I'd like to get your take on some of the worst offenders. I'll be back with my interview with April Few right after this. U.S. Parents Involved in Education developed the game-changing Blueprint to Establish State Control of Education, a visionary initiative that aims to restore state sovereignty, enhance student learning, and safeguard parental rights. But developing the political will to make this happen is critical. Washington's growing demand for control dwarfs its actual funding while generating bureaucracies that suppress local innovation. Parents and teachers are frustrated by regulations that hinder problem solving, and state education officials report that many staff members primarily manage federal programs. By following the USPIE blueprint, state leaders will be empowered to make strong cases to decision makers, educators, and parents to eliminate reliance on federal funding, reclaim control, and foster education excellence. Tune in next week for more insights from U.S. Parents Involved in Education, and connect with us at USPIE on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. My guest today is April Few, Executive Assistant of USPIE, and we're talking about USPIE's Millstone of the Month Award. April, please tell our audience what the award is, and then let's talk about some of our favorite worst offenders.
So USPIE's Millstone of the Month Award is the award that you never want to receive. It's given to those involved in government schools who commit the most egregious acts against children. So some of my favorite offenders, or the worst offenders, would actually be two recent ones, I would say. And I'm going to pull it up here. Our February 2025 offender was Arlington, Virginia's public school superintendent, Francisco Duran. He got the award for defending a sex offender who exposed himself in a girl's locker room. So there was a school district in Arlington, Virginia, the girls shared locker room facilities with an aquatic center there in the town. And a man who had, I think, 12 counts of sexual abuse and exposing himself in public and all kinds of weird stuff with the minors was allowed to be in there because he identified as a woman. He exposed himself to girls in that locker room, and the public school superintendent there in Arlington, Virginia, defended him, saying that they welcome everyone in the community and they want it to be a safe space. So I think that goes without saying why he definitely deserved that award. And then April 2025 was Planned Parenthood Federation's president and CEO, Alexis McGill Johnson, for handing out adult-themed coloring books at a science center in Kentucky. So at the Kentucky Science Center in Louisville, back in April, Planned Parenthood was allowed to be at the Science Center, and they were handing out coloring books to kids that had taken a field trip with the school. And it turned out that the coloring books included explicit photos of female and male genitalia. And so this was children ages 8 to 13 that were getting these coloring books. And The Planned Parenthood Federation came out and said, it was an accident. And Sherry, how many times have we heard from organizations like this when something like this happens and the damage has been done and these children have seen pornography or other inappropriate, explicit material, and they say, "Oh, we didn't mean to. It's an accident. It will never happen again." It's too late and it's unacceptable. So that's, because I have young children, it just gives me goosebumps to think about something like that happening.
Well, those were great choices. And if you don't mind me sharing one of my own, I looked back over the list and I went all the way back to, well, it's not that far actually. It's been less than a year ago in July 2024. And our recipient that month was Miguel Cardona, who is the former Secretary of Education under Joe Biden. So we awarded him the Millstone of the Month award because of his rules that he signed that changed the meaning of Title IX. So Title IX, of course, is the law that's been in place for more than 50 years that was intended to level the playing field for women in relationship to men's sports. So they took the definition of the Title IX and they expanded it to include the definition of sex discrimination and harassment to include sexual orientation and gender identity. So that, of course, would have profound implications for female-only spaces. So not just sports, but the locker rooms they share, the bathrooms. And, it's interesting because one of the Millstone awardees you pointed out mentioned the idea of, the defender was saying they wanted to create safe spaces for transgender individuals. But what about the girls and women in these locker rooms and these bathrooms and competing against men that are so much bigger and stronger than them? What about their safety? And as you know, in our film, we interviewed Bernadette Broyles, and I also interviewed her on the podcast. And one of the things she talked about, one of the cases she has tried, she talked about in the film, was a 6-year-old girl who was molested in the bathroom by a boy because he was allowed in the boys' bathroom. So this is a serious issue, and I'm so glad that the rules never actually were official because they were challenged by a court in Tennessee, and it was held over, and I think it was finally decided that it was a violation of the law. They could not change the definition of a law that was existing. And then, of course, Trump got into office and he reversed all of that. And so, in fact, he's now our champion defending women and girls when it comes to sports. So that's one of my favorites. I thought I would share that as well. And another thing that I wanted you to share with our listeners is some of the resources we have on our website to equip parents. So April, tell us some of the ones you find parents really need to know about.
There's so many resources that USPIE has developed over the last 10 years, and they can all be found at our website under the resources tab. But from talking with parents across the country, I guess some of the top ones would be our guide on how local school boards work. We recommend that if parents really want to get involved and make changes in their local community and local schools, to run for school board. And it's not as difficult as you would think it is. It would take some work, but we have a guide for parents on our website on how a school board functions, and then we actually have several resources regarding local school boards. But that would be a great place to start, especially for parents who do want to get involved, but they've maybe never even been to a school board meeting. That's a great place to begin, is just show up and find out what's going on. Because when I started going to school board meetings, I was shocked at really what was happening, but the decisions being made, but the attitude of the school board members. They're very, and not all of them, but a lot of them have become elitists and think that they know better than any of the parents. They don't want to hear opinions from the parents. So like I said earlier, at USPIE, we have recommendations for parents who do even want to run a slate of candidates for school board, and we've been successful in different states on flipping school boards. So that would be one of the resources. We have another resource that is titled Act on Your Parental Rights. Recently, there's been talk and even legislation that's been introduced in several states, like in Florida. They just created an office for parental rights under their Department of Education. And in South Carolina, there was a senator who shared that information on Facebook and said, "This is what we need here. You know, we need legislation for parental rights." And we all know that our rights come from God, not government. And anything that the government institutes, they can take away as well. You know, we don't need the government legislating our rights. And that document there is very well written and explains all of the parental rights stuff that's happening now. One of my favorite ones is Parental Choice versus School Choice. That's on our resources page also. And it lays out the problems with the current school choice model that the government is promoting and supporting, and how what we need is true parental choice, not just a choice between which government schools we want our children to attend. So that one, some of these are educational. They're all educational. Some have action. Some are just strictly, you know, educating you on things, and that's one of the education pieces. We have resources on critical race theory that are very well done. You and I traveled South Carolina giving presentations on how to identify critical race theory in your schools and how to abolish it. And so those resources kind of stemmed from that presentation that we were giving. And we have resources for school board members also, and some good resources that you might want to send your legislators. And the USPIE blueprints. I think that would be the last one I would highlight. There's so many. Sorry, I know I'm going on, but we have two blueprints. One is to close the U.S. Department of Education, and the second one is to establish state control of education. And the one to establish state control of education would be a really good one to send to your state legislators, because there are many states that USPIE is actually working with a couple of states, but there's a lot of states who are looking in how to do that, especially now that Trump is, you know, trying to close the Department of Education and trying to work with Congress. Now's the time for states to look at an actual plan, step by step, on how to establish control in their own states and get the federal government out.
Well, that was a great list of our resources. Thank you, April. And I know there's much more on there too, but you have highlighted some of the best, and I appreciate that. And I was reminded when you were talking about your experience with the school board and when you first started going to school board meetings and their attitude. And I do remember the conversation you had with one of the board members after the meeting, and how rude he was.
Yes.
And I was also, did you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, sure. So I was working for USPIE, but actually never started going to school board meetings until after a few years. And one of the first school board meetings I went to, the attitude of one of the school board members was so arrogant, even when he was up there with his colleagues, and he was so condescending to the parents who were just trying to voice their opinions. And so after, I went up to him outside and I asked him, you know, why he said what he said or did what he did. It was many years ago, so I can't exactly remember what he said. But he did say to me, "You don't know how this works, and you don't know how far back we go with each other." So it was like, it doesn't matter what any of the parents say, they're going to do what they want to do anyway, because they're, you know, they're school board members, they know what's best, they're tight and in with each other. So it's just like an inner circle thing, and parents can't get in. You can't penetrate that inner circle. But the fact that he was so elitist, it was pretty shocking and telling on how, not all, but how many school board members think.
Yes, and I recall one of the things he said to you also was, um, "I trust those people," and he was talking about the superintendent. So it's just a classic example of how school board members typically just rubber stamp anything the superintendent brings to them. And they forget, and that's what parents need to be reminded of, is that it is the elected members of the school board that are in authority, not the superintendent of education, because we never see that on school boards. All of the school board meetings I've been to and been involved with over the years, you have a superintendent that runs the meetings, the school board meetings, and the school board just supports whatever they ask for. And that's what that gentleman, if I might call him that, was saying to you, is I trust these people. So I guess what had been said was, we're not teaching critical race theory, but we had presented evidence that they were indeed, and they wouldn't hear any of it. So yeah, and the other thing I just want to say quickly was, it reminded me of my beginnings when my children were in school and I was going to school board meetings, and I learned very quickly that they want parents' involvement as far as helping them raise money for the PTA and being sure kids do their homework assignments, and volunteering for field trips. But beyond that, keep your parenthood at the door. And that's exactly what I learned very early on. And, it just fueled my passion and my eventual involvement and the starting of South Carolina Parents Involved in Education, which is how USPIE first began. So we need to take another short break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask you the 2 final questions I ask of all my guests. So don't go away. We'll be right back with my interview with April Few right after this. Despite increased federal intervention and spending since the 1960s, U.S. educational achievement has not improved and has arguably declined due to an emphasis on indoctrination over education. U.S. Parents Involved in Education's mission is to empower parents and local communities to break free from federal influence and reclaim parental authority over their children's education. USPIE's blueprint to close the U.S. Department of Education outlines 5 steps to end federal intrusion in education. Step 1. Move all program control to the states. Step 2. Repeal all federal education laws. Step 3. Privatize college loans. Step 4. Close the Federal Department of Education. And Step 5. Reduce federal tax collection in kind. Tune in next week for more insights from U.S. Parents Involved in Education, and connect with us at USPIE on X and Facebook. To join the movement, visit uspie.org. Welcome back to Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few. With me today is April Few, my daughter-in-law and executive assistant at USPIE. And before we end this episode, I want to ask you 2 final questions, April. First, what are some of your concerns? And then what are some of the things you're optimistic about?
Great questions. Some of my concerns would be, I think, number 1, the number of children who are being groomed into a transgender lifestyle. I just can't help but think, what will these children be like when they're adults? And all of this is definitely perpetuated in the government schools. Another concern would be the legislators who think it is their responsibility and their duty fully to educate children, when we know that it's up to the parents. Here in South Carolina, we had a representative on the Education Committee in the House who was on the House floor saying that it is her responsibility and the responsibility of the committee to track and monitor all education. And this was a few years ago, and she was a Republican. So it just represents the mindset of a lot of legislators who believe that it is their responsibility, not the responsibility of the parents, to educate children in our state. And I guess one more concern would be the number of parents who are completely capable of educating their children themselves, who choose not to. And by this, I mean, I come across a lot of parents who, and mothers in particular, I talk to a lot of moms with our different extracurricular activities and the stuff that we do with homeschool. But former teachers, current teachers, moms who aren't working but staying at home yet sending their children to school. And there's just one that comes to mind because she is a former teacher and she works part-time, but she would be so good at educating her children, and she chooses to send them to school. I think they go to not traditional public school, but anyway, it's just the number of families who aren't willing to make sacrifice and what it would take to educate their children at home. So maybe that might be an untraditional answer, but that really is one of the concerns that I have.
Well, and I couldn't agree with you more on that last one. And then I'll let you get to your final question about what you're optimistic about. But I agree with you. It's very discouraging to me to see the parents, and I have someone in mind as well who, is very capable. And I've heard this from more than one mom. It doesn't work. It's not like they have the excuse that a lot of parents have, I need the income and those kinds of things, which I still think can be overcome. But they'll say things like, I just couldn't do that. That's not me. I couldn't be with my kids all day like that. I would go crazy. I've actually heard a parent say that. And
Me
so,
too.
they've gotten so used to the government taking care of their children all day while they do whatever it is they do. And it's of course the norm. So that's the kind of paradigm shift we need to have in education, is open parents' minds to the idea that not only is it the best thing for their children, which you have told me and so have other homeschool parents, it's a very rewarding experience if they will just give it a chance. And even for those parents who say that they need to work and they need the income, I loved what Sam Sorbo said on our podcast about sacrifice. She said that sacrifice is not a bad thing. And I've never thought, sacrifice sounds like a hard, difficult, bad thing. But even if we think about our faith, the biggest sacrifice there was Jesus sacrificing his life and the good that it did for humanity. So sacrifice might be difficult, but it can always and usually is for good. And that's what parents need to understand about their income. And especially if they're Christians, they have to believe that this would be in the best interest of their children, and God will provide for their families if they take a step of faith and do what's going to not only be in their best interest, but protect them from the very evil that's happening in government schools. So let's close with your the final question of the things you're optimistic about, April.
The number of parents who have chosen to pull their kids out of government schools. Homeschooling has increased. I think it's doubled, if not more than that, in the last couple of years. So how encouraging that there are so many parents who are saying, no, not anymore. They've woken up, and they're taking action and making steps to better their families and their children's lives. So that's extremely encouraging. And I guess more on the policy side, something that I'm very excited about is USPIE working with members of Congress on legislation to get the federal government out of education and let states keep more of their money so that they can run programs. Ultimately we want it back on the local level, but if we can at least get the federal government out, as I've heard you say so many times, you can much easier influence your state legislature than you can members of Congress. So if we can get it back to the state level, I think we can have some real change done. So very optimistic about that. And, just lastly, ultimately, parents are the ones who are responsible for their child's education. Not schools, not legislators, not even co-ops, not other parents. It is the parent. And that's my personal opinion. I think parents, we need to stop being so afraid of failing. The schools are failing. Okay, there's only 30% of children across the country who can read and do math on grade level, not to mention all of the gobbledygook that's being poured into their heads and all these ideologies. No one teaches a child better than the parent who loves that child and has the will to do it. They may not be perfect. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. We don't do things perfect. But we got to be afraid. We got to stop being afraid of, like I said, quote unquote, failing. With the internet nowadays, I mean, you can find anything you want online, any information. Because actually, I Google stuff every single day when I do school with my kids. Even when it comes to, third grade math, sometimes you forget things. And I say, well, let me just look that up. I know it seems silly, but it's not silly. And it's a totally normal thing for that to happen. We got to stop thinking that we need a government-sanctioned degree to educate our children. I don't have a college degree yet. There's no one that is more capable of teaching my children than I am. So if you feel led to make a change, pull your kids out of school, I suggest one resource actually that Alex Newman is a part of leading is Public School Exit. It gives you a lot of resources on alternatives to education. And the best model to research also for educating is the classical model of education. So all you have to do, because that's what I did, was I did research on the classical model of education, the trivium, and how children naturally develop and appropriately develop their brains, I mean. So if you just do a little bit of reading on that, and it's kind of natural progression, when you teach your children, you start with phonics, teaching them to read, and then before you know it, they can read all the material and be much more self-sufficient. So you kind of learn along with your kids. But I just want to be an encouragement to anyone who may be on the fence or really considering making that leap, that you can do it, you're the best one to do it, and don't let anybody discourage you from doing it.
Very good. That's excellent word of encouragement from your own experience, April. And I'm sure that's going to touch the lives of many people. I appreciate you sharing that. And thanks again for coming back on the podcast. I'm looking forward to having you host in an upcoming episode.
Happy to help.
Absolutely. I know you'll do a great job. Join us again next week for another episode of Unmasking Government Schools with Sherry Few.
U.S. Parents Involved in Education is a nonprofit coalition dedicated to restoring local control of education and parental authority. By empowering parents to reclaim responsibility for their children's learning and encouraging states to move away from federal influence, USPIE seeks to create a culture where parents are the primary decision makers in education and schools support families without the burden of federal mandates. If you want to start a state or regional USPIE chapter in your area, please visit uspie.org and complete the brief questionnaire in the chapters section.